Sophie was one of the ones who pressured. Sorry. Sophie was one of those who pressured the most. She shouldn't have done that. I can hardly bring myself to tell what it was Sophie had to give up. It was something only a boy could think of. And it was so gross and repugnant that the rest of us almost pleaded on her behalf. Sophie herself hardly said anything. Just no and no and no, and shook her head again and again. And the rest of her was shaking some too. Huge Hans was merciless. And of course we had to admit that we had all been quite unyielding when he had been forced to hand over his neon yellow bike. It wasn't the same, we said. How do you know my neon yellow bike doesn't mean as much to me as Sophie's innocence means to her? We didn't. So even though we had our doubts, it was eventually agreed that Huge Hans was going to help her lose it the following evening at the old sawmill. 4 of the boys were to stay behind to lend a hand if necessary. The rest of us would be sent home to make sure we wouldn't come to her rescue. It was a dreadful day at school. Sophie sat white as the classroom walls at her desk and said nothing. Not even when some of the girls tried to comfort her. No one else dared say anything either, for thinking about what was going to happen to Sophie. And it was almost worse than when we were making trouble. For Mr. Eskildson had never known us so quiet all at once in the same lesson. He was beginning to suspect, and started going on about our class behaving very oddly ever since the beginning of the school year. He was right, but fortunately he didn't connect it with Pierre Anton's empty desk. If he'd started on about Pierre Anton, I'm not sure we could have kept things up. Well, Eskildson went on and on about our strange behavior since August. I turned my head to look at Sophie. I don't think I would have blamed her if she'd told on us at that point. But she didn't. She sat completely still, all pale in the face like little Emil's coffin must have been when it was new. And yet calm, and almost collected. Like I imagined a saint would look who was about to meet her death. I started thinking about how it all had begun, and how Pierre Anton was still yelling at us from up there in his plum tree. Mornings and afternoons, and whenever we passed by Terringve 25. It wasn't just us who were going crazy from all of this. It sounded like he himself would be losing it if we didn't get him out of that tree soon. Chimpanzees have almost exactly the same brain and DNA as us, he'd hollered the day before, and started swinging around in the branches of the plum tree. There's nothing the least special about being human. And this morning, he'd said, there are 6 billion people on Earth, way too many. But in the year 2025, there will be 8.5 billion. The best thing we can do for the future of the world is to die. He must have gotten all that knowledge from the newspapers. I don't see the point. Collecting all that knowledge others have already discovered. It's enough to make anybody lose heart who has not yet grown up and found out anything for themselves. But grown-ups love collecting knowledge. The more, the better. And it doesn't even matter if it's other people's knowledge and something you only learn from reading. Sorry, let me start over. He must have gotten all that knowledge from the newspapers. I don't see the point. Collecting all that knowledge others have already discovered. It's enough to make anybody lose heart who has not yet grown up and found out anything for themselves. But grown-ups love collecting knowledge. The more, the better. And it doesn't even matter if it's other people's knowledge and something you only learn from reading. Sophie was doing right to grin and bear it. There was definitely something that mattered, in spite of everything. Even if that something was something you had to lose. Sorry. I knew there was something I was forgetting. Thank you. I don't know exactly what happened the night Huge Hans helped Sophie give up the innocents. The next day, there was just a smidgen of blood and some slime on a checked handkerchief, lying at the top of the heap of meaning. And Sophie was walking a bit funny, like it hurt when she moved her legs. Nonetheless, it was Sophie who looked proud and inapproachable, while Huge Hans was running around trying to please her. He probably wants to do it again, Gerda whispered in my ear and giggled, completely forgetting that she wasn't talking to me because of the matter of Oscar Little. I didn't reply, but tried later on to get Sophie to tell me what had happened and how it had been. She wouldn't tell me anything, just walked around looking like she'd found out a secret that may have been terrible, but that nonetheless had handed her the key to something of great meaning. Great meaning? Greater meaning? Greatest meaning? There were only 3 of us to go before we could show the heap of meaning to Pierre Anton, if he promised never again to sit in his plum tree and holler at us. Excuse me. There were only 3 to go. Holy Carl, Pretty Rosa, and Jan Johann. Sophie chose Holy Carl. He was to deliver Jesus on the cross. Chapter 14.